Hey guys, tonight we're taking a trip back to ancient Rome. But we're not going to be visiting the emperor in his shiny marble palace or debating philosophy in the Senate. No, we're going to the grimy, sweaty, and frankly, very desperate underbelly of the empire. We're going to find out what it was really like to be a gladiator. And I'll give you a little spoiler alert, you'd probably have a really, really bad time. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It helps me know what kind of stories you want to hear. And while you're at it, let me know in the comments what city you're in and what time it is for you right now. It's always fascinating to see where everyone is tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Close your eyes for a moment. Feel that that's not a gentle Mediterranean breeze. That's the hot, dusty wind of a provincial Roman town, carrying the smell of stale wine, baking bread, and unwashed bodies. This is your world. And right now, your world is shrinking down to the size of a single, catastrophic mistake. Forget the stories of heroic warriors captured on the battlefield. Forget the noble princes seeking glory in the arena. For you, the journey to becoming a gladiator doesn't start with a bang. It starts with a whimper. Maybe it was debt, a few bad dice rolls, a loan from the wrong person with an interest rate that would make a loan shark blush. You thought you could handle it, but the debt grew like a weed, choking the life out of your small business, your family, your future. Or maybe it was simpler. Maybe you were just hungry. You saw a loaf of bread on a market stall, and for a split second, desperation won out over reason. A scuffle, a shout, and suddenly the local vigiles, the city watch, have their hands on you. There's no fancy trial, no passionate defense attorney. You're dragged before a local magistrate, a man who looks at you with the same bored expression he uses for stray dogs. He listens to the charge for about 30 seconds, glances at your shabby tunic, and delivers the sentence damnatio ad ludum. This is the grim reality for most gladiators. The vast majority weren't volunteers, they were the unwanted dregs of the Roman legal system. They were prisoners of war, condemned criminals, and runaway slaves. Being sentenced ad ludum was, in essence, a death sentence, but one stretched out for the entertainment of the masses. It was considered a step above being thrown to the lions, but only a very small step. Your life, your identity, your very name is stripped away in that moment. You are no longer Lucius, son of Marcus. You are a commodity, a piece of state-owned meat, soon to be put on the market. Of course, some free men did, for reasons we can barely comprehend, volunteer to become gladiators. They signed contracts, effectively selling their freedom for a set period in exchange for a signing bonus and the faint hope of fame and fortune. Why any free citizen would willingly choose a life of legal and social death is a question historians are still trying to piece together. Was it crushing poverty, a reckless desire for adrenaline and celebrity, or a form of social suicide? The motivations were likely as varied as the men themselves. But for you, standing there in iron shackles, the rough metal already chafing your wrists, there was no choice. You didn't sign a contract, you were branded by a verdict. There's a little detail they don't show you in the movies. Once you're condemned, you become something called a servus sponeae, a slave of the penalty. This is a bizarre legal category. You are literally enslaved to your own punishment. You have no rights, no property, no legal standing. Striking you isn't assault, it's like kicking a piece of furniture. Your fate is no longer in your hands. It's in the hands of the men who run the gladiator trade. As you're led away from the courthouse, the sounds of your town, the merchants hawking their wares, the children laughing begin to fade. You're being marched towards a new life, or more accurately, a new kind of death. And your first stop is the place where men like you are bought and sold. The journey is short and brutal. You're chained to a handful of other men, a miserable procession shuffling through the dusty streets. No one meets your eye. The citizens of Rome have perfected the art of looking past people like you. You are human refuse, being swept to the designated corner of the city where such things are handled. You arrive not at the grand slave market where skilled artisans and comely servants are auctioned, but at a grittier, more specialized trading post. The air here is thick with the smell of sweat, fear, and cheap alignment. This is where flesh is traded for the specific purpose of being torn apart. You're reshoved into a pen, a wooden enclosure that's seen better days, and your shackles are removed. For a fleeting moment, you feel a sense of relief, but it's quickly replaced by a new kind of dread. You are now on display. A man with a wooden staff prods you and the others, forcing you to stand up straighter, to turn this way and that. Then he arrives. He doesn't look like a senator or a general. He wears a fine tunic, but it's practical, not ostentatious. There's a cold, appraising look in his eyes, the look of a butcher inspecting a side of beef. This is a Lonnie-style gladiator owner, trainer and broker. A profession that was both entertainment, a man who profited from the lowest dregs of society. To the Roman elite, he was a necessary evil, a vulgar businessman. But to you, right now he is good. He steps into the pen, and a hush falls over your small group. He walks past a scarred German prisoner, barely giving him a glance. He dismisses a weary youth who looks too frail. Then he stops in front of you. He grabs your chin, his grip surprisingly strong, and forces your mouth open, peering at your teeth as if you were a horse. You feel a surge of useless anger. Just weeks ago, you were a man with a name, a home, a life. Your dental health is being evaluated as a predictor of your longevity in combat. He runs his hands down your arms and legs, feeling the muscle, testing for old injuries. HES not just looking for brute strength. HES looking at bone structure, at the width of your shoulders, at the length of your shoulders, at the length of your limbs. HES already picturing you in the arena. What kind of opponent would make for a good show? You are a puzzle HES solving, a raw material HES figuring out how to sculpt. And here's a fashionably grim piece of bureaucracy for you for a condemned man like yourself. Adamatus, the Loniste doesn't actually buy you outright from the state. He's technically leasing you. You are government property, and he is paying for the right to train you and, ultimately, profit from your potential death in the arena. If you survive love, your lease might expire, and you'd be returned to the state to finish your sentence in the mines, a fate many considered worse than the arena. If you die, the Lonist A pays a penalty fee to the state for the loss of their property. It's all just business. The precise details of these contracts, the lease terms, the liability clauses for a gladiator's death, the kickbacks to magistrates are something historians still try to reconstruct from fragmented legal texts and inscriptions. It was a complex and sordid enterprise, a public-private partnership built on human suffering. The Loniste isn't just a trainer, he's a risk manager. HES betting that the money he can make from your fights will outweigh his initial investment and any potential penalties. He seems satisfied with what he sees in you. He gives a curt nod to the official overseeing the pen. A brief, muttered negotiation follows. Numbers are mentioned that mean nothing to you. You are the subject of a conversation, but you have no part in it. A small bag of coins changes hands. It's done. You've been acquired. Two burly men, their faces scarred and impassive, step forward. They are the Lonisters enforcers, his familiar gladiator. They grab you, and this time there is no pretense of civility. One of them holds a branding iron, its tip glowing a malevolent orange from a nearby brazier. The brand isn't just a mark of ownership, it's a public declaration of your status. It's a permanent reminder that you are no longer a person. You are property of the Ludis. You try to struggle, a final, futile act of defiance. It's useless. The hot iron presses against your skin. The searing pain is the last thing you feel before the world goes dark. Your next conscious thought will be inside the walls of your new home, the gladiator school. You regain consciousness on a bed of straw, the sharp, musty smell filling your nostrils. The first thing you feel is a throbbing, searing pain on your shoulder or leg. You tentatively touch the spot and flinch. It's a fresh brand, oozing undangry, a crude emblem, perhaps a trident or a bull's head seared into your flesh. It's the Lonister's logo, and it marks you as his. You sit up, your head swimming, and take in your new reality. You're in a small windowless cell, more of a cage than a room. The walls are rough stone, the floor is packed earth, and a heavy wooden door with a small barred grate is your only connection to the world outside. There's no privacy, no comfort, just a thin layer of straw and a bucket in the corner. A guard, A hulking figure with a face like a clenched fist bangs on your door with a wooden rod. Up, out, now. The voice is flat, devoid of emotion. It's an order, not a request. You stumble out of the cell and find yourself in a long corridor lined with identical doors. Other men are emerging, a motley crew of defeated-looking souls. Gauls, Thracians, Africans, men from every corner of the Roman Empire, all sharing the same dazed, hollow-eyed expression. You're herded out into a large, sun-drenched courtyard. And here you see it in its full, terrible glory, the ludus. It's a fortress. High walls topped with sharpened stakes surround the entire compound, blocking out the sky and any hope of escape. In the center is a vast, open area of sand and packed earth, dotted with wooden posts spoly that are scarred and splintered from countless weapon strikes. Around this central training ground are the buildings, the barracks you just left, a long, low structure that looks like a stable, a formidable-looking building, you guess. It is the armory, and another that smells of medicinal herbs and something metallic. Like blood, the infirmary. This is the standard layout of a Roman gladiator school, a self-contained, high-security facility designed for one purpose: to mass-produce fighters. It's part military barracks, part prison, part abattoir. The air hums with a terrifying energy. You hear the rhythmic thwack of wooden swords hitting a post, the grunts of men pushing their bodies to the breaking point, the sharp crack of a trainer's whip, and the guttural shouts of commands in a mix of Latin and other languages. There is no laughter. There is no idle chatter. There is only the sound of disciplined, relentless work. This isn't a school, it's a factory, and you are the raw material. Here's a curious detail about these places. While they were prisons, the more prestigious ones, like the Ludus Magnus right next to the Colosseum in Rome, were complex and even architecturally impressive. Archaeologists have unearthed evidence that the Ludus Magnus had its own miniature practice arena, complete with spectator seating, possibly for VIPs to get a sneak peek at the new talent. It even had an underground tunnel connecting it directly to the Colosseum, so the gladiators could be marshaled and enter the main event without ever walking the city streets. A private subway for the condemned. But this luxury of efficiency does nothing to soften the oppressive atmosphere. Every move you make is watched. The trainers, often retired gladiators themselves, patrol the yard with an air of cold authority. They are a constant, menacing presence. The absolute control is what strikes you most. Your life is now dictated by a bell. A bell to wake, a bell to eat, a bell to train, a bell to sleep. Your freedom has been so completely erased that you can't even decide when to relieve yourself without permission. How inescapable were these schools really? Historians still debate this. While the high walls and constant guards suggest a high-security prison, some evidence points to a more complex reality. Perhaps trusted, veteran gladiators were occasionally granted limited leave, or the security was more focused on preventing mass breakouts than individual escapes. The control might have been as much psychological as it was physical, breaking your will to resist so thoroughly that the walls became secondary. But for you, a new arrival, a Tiro, the walls look very, very real. They are the edge of your world. You are shoved into a line with other newcomers. The chief trainer, a man with a web of scars across his face and one cloudy eye, inspects you all. He doesn't look at you as a man. He looks at you as a problem to be solved, a piece of clay to be molded, or a weak link to be discarded. Your old life is over. The grueling process of erasing who you were and building a killer in your place is about to begin. Over the next few days, you begin to understand the power structure of this place, and at the very top of the pyramid is the man who bought you the Loniste. You don't see him often. He is more of a shadow than a physical presence, a ghost who haunts the halls of his own prison. He is a businessman, and his time is too valuable to be spent in the training yard. He is out negotiating contracts with magistrates and event organizers, editors, marketing his star performers, and managing the grim logistics of his deadly enterprise. But his authority is absolute. Every rule, every meal, every beating happens because he wills it. The Loniste occupies a strange and contradictory place in Roman society. On one hand, he is incredibly wealthy. On the other, he is socially despised. He is a member of the Infames, just like you. His profession, Dealing in the lives of slaves and condemned men was considered sordid and dishonorable. A senator might secretly enjoy the games and even bet on the outcome, but he would never shake Honeste's hand in public. They were the ultimate pariah capitalists, growing rich from a trade that society deemed disgusting yet couldn't get enough of. This social stigma meant that many Honeste were not from the Roman elite, but were often freedmen or ambitious individuals from lower social strata, who saw this unsavory trade as a path they couldn't achieve otherwise. When he does appear in the courtyard, a chilling silence falls. Even the most hardened trainers straighten their backs. He moves through the yard with an air of detached ownership, his eyes scanning his investments. He might stop to watch a promising new trainee like you go through your paces, his expression unreadable. Is he pleased, disappointed? You have no idea. HES not looking at your technique, HES calculating profit and loss. He sees the cost of your food, your training, your medical care, all weighed against the potential prize money and appearance fees you might earn. You are a walking, breathing entry on a balance sheet. His word is law, and his punishments are swift and brutal. Insubordination isn't just disciplined, it's crushed. The tools of his trade aren't just swords and nets, they're whips, chains, and branding irons. He has the legal right to kill you for any infraction, but that would be bad for business. It's far more cost-effective to use non-lethal, terror-inducing punishments to make an example of someone. Flogging is common. So is being shackled in your cell for days on end with minimal food and water. This is a core part of the business model. Breaking you down mentally is just as important as building you up physically. A gladiator who still believes he is a man with rights is a dangerous liability. A gladiator who accepts he is a tool is useful. Here's a bizarre twist that shows the complexity of the Roman world. Despite being social outcasts, successful Honeste could become incredibly influential. They were the agents and managers for the biggest celebrities in the empire. A Honeste, who trained a champion gladiator, a superstar beloved by the crowds, held a valuable card. Politicians might secretly court his favor to ensure his star fighter appeared at the games they were sponsoring, knowing it would boost their own popularity. So while they were publicly reviled, behind the scenes, these men wielded a unique and grubby kind of power. Whether the historical figure of the Honeste was universally a cruel, sociopathic monster, or if some were more like tough but fair businessmen is a point of academic discussion. The surviving literature, written by the elite, paints them in the worst possible light. But it's likely the reality was a spectrum. Some were surely sadistic brutes who reveled in their power. Others may have viewed it as a job, treating their gladiators with a degree of pragmatic care, not out of kindness, but to protect their investment. A healthy, well-trained gladiator fights better and lives longer, thus earning more money. But for you, huddled in your cell, nursing your wounds after a brutal training session, these academic distinctions mean nothing. You don't care if your owner is a monster or just a ruthless man. The result is the same. He owns your body. He controls your life. He is not a man. He is a predator, and you are his prey. His shadow is a constant reminder that you are trapped in a system designed to exploit you until you break, one way or another. One morning, instead of being herded straight to the training yard, you and the other new arrivals, the tier ones, are lined up in front of a small, grim-looking altar. The Honeste is there, flanked by his chief trainer, the doctor. This isn't a religious ceremony, it's a legal one. It's the day you formally surrender what little is left of your former self. It's the day you take the oath. The doctor unrolls a scroll. He begins to read, his voice a low, gravelly monotone that carries across the silent courtyard. The Latin is formal, legalistic, and utterly terrifying. This is the Auctoramentum Gladiatium, the gladiator's oath. For the few volunteers in your group, this is the moment they legally become slaves. For you, a condemned man, it's a ritualistic confirmation of your status. He reads the words and you are expected to affirm them. The most famous version of this oath, passed down by the writer Petronius, is chillingly directory. Vinciai verbera ri, thero necari. It translates to I will endure to be bound, to be bound, to be beaten, and to be killed by the sword. Let those words sink in. This isn't a promise to fight well or to be brave. It's a promise to accept any and all forms of torment and destruction. You are formally giving your owner permission to do anything to you. You are signing away the right to your own bodily integrity. The oath is a psychological to love immense power. It severs your last mental link to the idea that you have any say in your own fate. From this moment on, your body is no longer your own vessel. It is a tool belonging to the Lomiste, to be used, abused, and ultimately destroyed for his profit and the crowd's entertainment. You mumble your assent along with the others. The words feel like ash in your mouth. You've just sworn to accept your own death by steel. It's a moment of profound psychological surrender. The Lomiste watches you all, his face impassive. He has seen this 100 times. It's the point where man's spirit is meant to crack, to be remolded into something else. And here's a fascinating, albeit dark, bit of Roman legal and social thinking. By taking this oath, a volunteer gladiator was doing something utterly bizarre. He was a free man willingly taking on the status of a slave, accepting the ultimate form of infamy. This act so baffled Roman jurists that they had to create a special legal category for it. The volunteer wasn't a true slave service, because his bondage was for a fixed term. But he certainly wasn't a free man neither anymore. He existed in a legal limbo, a man who had sold his own freedom. For you, the Damatus, the oath is just rubbing salt in the wound, but for the volunteer standing next to you, it's a conscious step into social oblivion. You are now a gladiator. The word itself comes from gladius, the short Roman sword. You are, literally, a swordsman, a man of the sword. Your identity is now your future profession. After the oath, you are assigned a new name. Your old name, the one your mother gave you, is gone. You might be given a strong, aggressive name like Ursus Bear or Tigris Tiger, or perhaps a name that hints at your origin, like Germanus. It's another layer of depersonalization. You are being rebranded. Do we know for certain that every single gladiator and every ludus across the empire swore this exact same oath? The evidence is a bit sketchy. The famous quote from Petronius is from a satirical novel, The Satyricon. While it likely reflects the spirit of the real oath, the exact wording and ritual probably varied from school to school and over the centuries. Some historians argue it might be a literary exaggeration, while others believe it captures the brutal essence of the gladiator's contract perfectly. It remains a topic of debate, but the core principle is undeniable. The gladiator had to formally accept his own potential destruction. The ceremony is over. You are dismissed and finally shoved towards the training posts in the center of the yard. The real work is about to begin, but something inside you has changed. The oath echoes in your head. To be burned, to be beaten, to be killed. It's not a threat anymore. It's a promise. A promise you just made to your new god, the Lomiste. And as you pick up a clumsy wooden sword for the first time, you understand. You understand. Your life is no longer about survival. It's about figuring out how to die in the way your owner demands. The bell rings for the midday meal. You're exhausted. Every muscle in your body screams in protest. The morning was a blur of grueling calisthenics, endless drills against a wooden post, and the constant, stinging threat of the trainer's rod against your back for any sign of weakness. You're herded into a long, low silencing hall. Long wooden tables and benches are arranged in rows. The air is thick with the smell of sweat, stale bread, and a strange, porridge-like concoction. You're handed a wooden bowl filled with a thick, greyish-brown mush. This is your fuel. You take your first spoonful. It's bland, heavy, and gritty. It's mostly barley. This is the staple of your new diet. You'll eat it boiled into a porridge, baked into a dense, rock-hard bread, or mixed into a thick soup with some beans and whatever vegetable scraps are available. Meat is a rarity, a small morsel thrown in on special occasions, perhaps before a big fight. This is the food that will build your new body, and it's what earned you your famous, and slightly derogatory, nickname Horderius, the barley eater. The gladiator diet was, by our modern standards, terrible. It was a high-carb, low-protein, and incredibly monotonous regimen. But it wasn't random. It was a calculated nutritional strategy. The goal of the Lomiste was to give you a lean, sculpted, beat-ready body. The goal was to make you an effective fighting machine. The massive intake of carbohydrates from the barley was designed for one primary purpose: to fatten you up. Why would they want you to be fat? For a very practical and very grim reason. A layer of subcutaneous fat provides a protective cushion. In the arena, you're going to get cut. A lot. A slice across the chiseled ABS of a modern bodybuilder might quickly hit a vital organ or cause significant muscle damage. But a slice across a thick layer of fat is different. It will bleed spectacularly, which the crowd loves, but it's less likely to be disabling or fatal. That layer of fat could be the difference between a fight-ending injury and a dramatic but survivable flesh wound. It was, in essence, a form of cheap, biological armor. So you eat your barley mush, day in on day out, building up that protective layer. To supplement this carb-heavy diet, you're also given a strange drink. It's a concoction of charred wood or bone ash mixed with vinegar. This ash drink sounds disgusting, and it probably was, but it was essentially a primitive mineral supplement. The diet was severely lacking in calcium, and strong bones were crucial for a fighter. The bone ash provided a concentrated dose of calcium to help fortify your skeleton against fractures and breaks. The discovery of this was a fascinating piece of modern science. When archaeologists and anthropologists analyzed the skeletal remains found in a gladiator cemetery in Ephesus, they found extraordinarily high levels of strontium and calcium, consistent with a diet of grains and a calcium supplement, exactly like the one described in ancient texts, right down to your bone density. Of course, the exact nutritional science behind the gladiator diet is still a subject of some debate among scholars. Was it a universally applied perfect diet, or did it vary greatly based on the wealth of the colonist and the availability of local foods? Some argue that the barley eater moniker might have been an insult used by the Roman elite, who dined on fine meats and cheeses to look down upon the lowest as gladiators. It's possible that more successful gladiators, the superstars, were given better food as a reward. Perhaps some trainers had their own secret nutritional theories, adding different herbs or supplements. But for you, a novice at the bottom of the food chain, there are no choices. You look around the dining hall. The veterans eat with a sullen mechanical efficiency. They don't savor the food, they consume it like a machine taking on fuel. There's no conversation, just a scraping of spoons against wooden bowls. You force down another mouthful of the gritty porridge. It tastes like dirt, like despair, but you eat it all. You scrape the bowl clean. Because in this place, every scrap of energy counts. This slump is what will keep you on your feet tomorrow in the training yard. It's what will build the flesh that will be offered up to the roaring crowd. It's the price of one more day of life. You're starting to get the rhythm of the ludus, the endless cycle of train, eat, sleep. You're getting stronger, your muscles hardening under the new layer of fat. But as your physical presence grows, your social presence in the world outside these walls has completely evaporated. You are now officially an infamies. This is your new legal status, and it's a brand that's even more permanent than the one seared on your shoulder. Infamia. The word literally means disgrace or ill repute. In Roman society, it wasn't just a social slight, it was a specific and devastating legal classification. To be branded with infamia meant the loss of your civil rights and your public voice. You couldn't vote, you couldn't hold public office, and you couldn't represent yourself or others in a court of law. Your testimony was considered inherently untrustworthy. You were, in the eyes of the Roman state, a non-person, a ghost. Who else shared this shameful status with you? The list is a fascinating glimpse into Roman social anxieties. You were lumped in with prostitutes and pimps, actors, and of course the loniste who owned you. Essentially, anyone who made a living by putting their body on public display for the pleasure of others was deemed infamies. An actor who moved the crowd to tears with a beautiful performance and a gladiator who thrilled them with a kill was seen through the same lens. They were selling their bodies for entertainment. And that was a source of deep shame in a society that prized civic dignity and control. This paradox is at the heart of your new existence. In the arena, you might be adored. The crowd might scream your name. Children might play with little clay figurines made in your likeness. Poets might write about your bravery. But the moment you step out of the arena, you are socially worthless. That same senator who cheered for you from his front row seat would consider it a stain on his reputation to even be seen speaking with you on the street. You are a celebrity and a pariah, a hero and a piece of trash, all at the same time. And this had very real-world consequences. If someone outside the ludus cheated you, you had no legal recourse. If a wealthy admirer promised you a gift and then reneged, you couldn't sue. You were entirely dependent on the protection and whims of your l'honnêteté, the very man who was profiting from your enslavement. It was a perfect system of control. By stripping you of your rights, the state ensured you could never challenge your condition. Here's a quirky and slightly sad detail that illustrates the depth of this social stigma. Even your final resting place was segregated. Gladiators were typically buried outside the main city cemeteries in separate, often unmarked plots. Archaeological finds, like the Gladiator Cemetery in Ephesus, Turkey, show these men buried together, apart from the general court number of fights. Their tombstones, when they could afford them, often listed their fighting record number of fights, number of victories, as if their career in the arena was the only thing that defined them, even in death. It was the final confirmation of their status as other. Now, how strictly was the social exclusion of infamy enforced in daily life? This is where historians find a grey area. It's easy to read the legal texts and assume gladiators were completely ostracized, but human nature is messy. Graffiti from Pompeii suggests that some gladiators were heartthrobs, the subject of romantic fantasies. We have evidence of wealthy women having affairs with them, a taboo that was both written and deeply scandalous. Did some of the rules of infamy get bent for the most famous and successful champions? It's highly likely. The line between official legal status and the messier reality of human interaction was probably blurry. The law said you were untouchable, but if you were a champion, maybe some people were willing to touch. But for you, a novice nobody, the full weight of infamy is crushing. It's a constant, suffocating reminder of your place. You're not just a prisoner in the ludus, you are a prisoner in the entire social structure of Rome. The high walls of the school are a physical barrier, but infamy is an invisible one, a cage made of law and prejudice that extends to every corner of the empire. It tells you, every single day, that you don't matter. Your only value lies in your ability to bleed and die for the amusement of the very people who despise you. Weeks turn into months. The initial shock has worn off, replaced by a dull, grinding routine. Your body is a canvas of bruises and healing cuts. You've learned the basic footwork, the parries, the desperate lunges. And with this growing competence, something strange begins to happen. You start to get noticed. Not by the law, you stay in a meaningful way, but by the other men, by the trainers. You survive a particularly tough sparring session. You disarm a more experienced opponent. A flicker of something that feels dangerously like pride ignites within you. Then comes your first real test. Not the Colosseum, not yet. But a small, provincial amphitheater, a dusty wooden oval in a town you've never heard of. It's part of a minor festival, a low-stakes event where the l'honnêteté can test his new stock. You march into the arena, your heart pounding a frantic rhythm against your ribs. The roar of the crowd, even a small one, is a physical force. It hits you like a wave. They are screaming, jeering, and cheering all at once. And in that moment, under the blazing sun, you fight. You don't remember the details, only the frantic clash of metal, the smell of sweat and blood, the desperate will to survive. And you win. Your opponent isn't killed. They just defeated, disarmed. The crowd gives a lukewarm cheer. You are granted your life. You are granted the arena, your body trembling with adrenaline, and for the first time you hear it. A few people in the stands are shouting your new name. Atticus, Atticus. It's a strange, disembodying experience. They aren't cheering for you, the man who was once a baker or a farmer. They are cheering for the persona that has been crafted for you. This is the seductive, poisonous trap of gladiator fame. As you win more fights, your celebrity grows. Back in the ludus, you might be granted small privileges, a slightly better meal, a less lumpy straw mattress, The other gladiators look at you with a new mixture of respect and envy. Outside the walls, your fame takes on a life of its own. Your name and likeness might be scribbled as graffiti on a tavern wall: Atticus the Thracian, 10 fights, 8 victories, or, even more bizarrely, Solace the Thracian makes the girls sigh. Little clay lamps or pieces of pottery are decorated with crude images of you in your fighting stance. You have become a brand, a pop culture icon. But what does this fame actually get you in real terms? Almost nothing. This is the central paradox of your life. You are famous, but you are not free. Your prize money, most of it goes directly to the l'honnête. He takes a massive cut for your upkeep, training, and medical expenses. You might be left with a small pittance, enough to buy a few comforts, but certainly not enough to buy your freedom. You have fans, but you cannot meet them. You have admirers, but you cannot have a relationship. You are a star, but you are still a slave. The fame is a gilded cage, a beautiful illusion painted on the bars of your prison. Here's a fascinatedly weird artifact of this celebrity culture: gladiator sweat. After a fight, an attendant would scrape the sweat and grime from a famous gladiator's body using a tool called a tranquil. This oily mixture of sweat, dirt, and blood was then bottled and sold to wealthy female admirers. It was believed to be a powerful aphrodisiac and was used as a cosmetic, like an exotic face cream. Imagine that. Your bodily fluids, the very essence of your pain and exhaustion, are being marketed as a luxury beauty product. Your fame makes you so desirable that people want to literally wear your suffering on their skin. The true nature of this celebrity and its impact on the gladiators themselves is a topic of much historical speculation. Did some of them buy into their own hype? Did they revel in the adoration of the crowd, using it as a mental shield against the horror of their daily lives? Or was it a source of constant, bitter irony? Did they hate the cheers of the same people who would, with a turn of the thumb, condemn them to death? Some inscriptions on tombstones, paid for by the gladiators themselves, boast of their victories and their status as crowd favorites, suggesting a degree of pride. But we have almost no first-hand accounts. We see the public image, but the private thoughts are lost to history. For you, the taste of fame is bittersweet. The roar of the crowd is a powerful drug, an intoxicating sound that, for a few brief moments, makes you feel like a god. It's a validation that you are good at what you do, that you are a survivor, but later, alone in your cell, the silence returns. The cheers fade, the fun to make in your old wounds flares up, and you are left with the cold, hard reality. Your name might be on every owner's lips, but your life is still in the hands of one man, and no amount of cheering can change that. You've proven you can survive. You're no longer a complete novice at hero. Now the l'honnête and his trainers have a decision to make. They need to categorize you, to turn you from a generic fighter into a specific type of gladiator. This isn't a choice you get to make. You don't get to wander into the armory and pick the coolest looking helmet or the biggest sword. Your body type, your natural aptitude, your speed, and your strength have all been observed. You are about to be assigned your career. This specialization was a key part of the spectacle. The Romans loved matchups between different and deliberately unbalanced types of fighters. Pitting two identically armed gladiators against each other was considered boring. The drama came from contrasting styles. Heavy armor versus speed. A long-range weapon versus a short one. Attack versus defense. Your new identity will be determined by what makes for a good shirt. The chief trainer, the doctor, pulls you aside. He looks you up and down, not as a person, but as a set of attributes. You're relatively quick on your feet, but you're not the strongest man in the barracks. Based on this, he makes his decision. You will be a THRAX, a Thracian-style fighter. You're handed your new set of equipment. Its bent shape is designed to strike around an opponent's shield. Your helmet is a masterpiece of intimidation, covering your entire face and adorned with a menacing griffin crest. Your only other protection is a padded loincloth, a belt, and two high-armored shin guards called greaves. Most of your torso is left completely bare. You are a balance of moderate protection and high agility. Your job is to be fast, to dart in and out, and to use your weirdly shaped sword to find the gaps in a heavier opponent's armor. You look across the training yard and see the other classes being drilled. There's the Milo, the fisherman, with his massive, oblong shield scutum, a helmet with a fish-like crest, and a classic Roman gladius. Here's the tank, the heavy infantryman. A TS often pitted against your type, the THRAX. Then there's the most famous and bizarre of them all, the restorative, the net man. This guy is the embodiment of tactical weirdness. He has no helmet, no shield, and virtually no armor besides a shoulder guard galas and a padded arm guard manica. His weapons a weighted net, a long trident, and a small dagger. His entire strategy revolves around staying at a distance, ensnaring his opponent in the net, and then moving in with the trident. He is the ultimate example of speed and trickery versus brute force. He often fights the heavily armed Seikoto. And the list goes on. There were the Hoplomachai who fought like Greek spearmen, and the Equites who started their fights on horseback. There were even more obscure types, like the Scissor who had a strange, crescent-bladed weapon on his arm, or the Undebate who fought blind, wearing a helmet with no eye holes, relying on hearing alone in a terrifying display for the crowd. Here's a detail that's practical and slightly comical. Your training is now specialized under a specific trainer, also called a doctor, who was an expert in that particular fighting style. So there would be a Dr. Th Racum for the Thracians, and a Dr. Milanum for the Milos. It was like having a specialized coach for a specific position on a sports team. This trainer, often a retired gladiator himself, knew every trick, every weakness, and every advantage of his assigned style. He would drill you relentlessly, teaching you how to maximize your equipment's strengths and protect its weaknesses. Did gladiators ever get to change their classification, or were they stuck in their assigned role for their entire career? This is a question that historical sources don't fully answer. It's likely that for most, the initial assignment was permanent. The Lon estate invested in specific sets of armor and training for you, and changing was inefficient. However, it's plausible that a highly successful and veteran gladiator might have been allowed to switch styles, or perhaps was trained in multiple disciplines to make him a more versatile and valuable performer. We have some tombstone inscriptions that seem to list victories in different categories, but the evidence is sparse. For now, you are a THRAX. This is your new identity. You are no longer just Atticus, the gladiator. You are Atticus the Thracian. You start training with the other THRAEs. You learn the specific dance of your style, how to use the small shield not just to block, but to punch, how to use the curved sword to hook around your opponent's defenses. You are no longer just learning to fight. You are learning a deadly art form, a specific choreography of violence, and your first opponent, the one you'll face in your next real match, will be a man who has learned an entirely different dance. The sun has not yet risen, but the ludus is already awake. A bell clangs, a harsh, metallic sound that cuts through the pre-dawn gloom. This is your alarm clock. There is no snooze button. You roll off your straw mattress, your body a collection of aches and pains. This is the start of another day, and it will be almost identical to the last, and the one before that. The grind is relentless, a soul-crushing routine designed to break down your individuality and forge you into a weapon. Your day begins not with swordplay, but with pure, unadulterated physical conditioning. The trainers, a mix of freedmen and retired gladiators with stony faces and bodies, like knotted ropes, herd you into the main yard. They are the doctoress and their assistants. They carry long wooden rods through desks, and they are not afraid to use them. A sharp rap across the shins or back is the punishment for laziness, for a sloppy push-up, for a moment's hesitation. The warm-up is a brutal affair in itself. Running. Enter slaps around the sandy courtyard until your lungs burn and your legs feel like lead. Then come the calisthenics, what the Romans called executatio. Jumps, lunges, lifting heavy stones or lead weights. It's a primitive form of CrossFit, and its only goal is to build your power and stamina. You must be able to endure. In the arena, exhaustion is a death sentence. An opponent won't give you a moment to catch your breath. After the conditioning, you finally pick up your weapons. But they are not the real thing. You train with wooden weapons, oft unweighted to be even heavier than their metal counterparts. The theory was simple: if you can train all day with a heavy, clumsy wooden sword Rudy's, the real lighter, perfectly balanced steel gladius or seeker will feel like a feather in your hand during an actual fight. You spend hours that blur into one long ache, practicing your moves against a palace. The palace is a thick wooden stake, about 6 feet high, driven deep into the earth. It is your most important training partner. It doesn't move, it doesn't get tired, and it doesn't fight back. It is the perfect target. Your doctor stands behind you, his voice a constant critical drone. Higher with the shield, your footwork is a disgrace. Again, you strike the post again and again. Thrust, parry, dodge. You practice the specific moves of your fighting style. The THRAX, darting attacks, the way to hook your curved blade around an imaginary shield. You do this until your arm feels like it's going to fall off, and then you switch hands and do it again. The goal is muscle memory. In the heat of combat, you won't have time to think. Your body must react on its own. Your arm must know where to strike before your brain gives the command. Here's a small but significant detail of the training you were taught to wound, not necessarily to kill. A quick, clean kill might be efficient, but it's not good entertainment. The crowd wanted a long, drawn-out fight, a dramatic struggle, so you are trained to inflict non-fatal but visually impressive wounds. A slice across the chest, a deep cut on the arm or leg. This prolongs the fight, builds suspense, and gets the crowd roaring. It's a subtle but horrifying aspect of the training. You are being taught to be a performer of violence, not just a practitioner of it. After hours at the palace, you move on to sparring. You are paired with another gladiator, usually of the same fighting type, to practice your techniques. These are controlled bouts overseen by the trainers. The goal is to drill, not to injure. An injured gladiator doesn't make the Loniste any money. But controlled is a relative term. Tempers flare. A sparring match can easily turn into a genuine brawl. The trainers are quick to step in, their rods cracking against helmets and limbs to restore order. Did the gladiators train every single day with the same intensity, while the general impression is one of a relentless 7 days a week grind? Some historians argue there was likely a more nuanced schedule. There would have been lighter days for rest and recovery, especially after a real fight. The trainers and doctors, for all their brutality, understood that a constantly overworked body is a brittle one. There might have been a cycle of high-intensity training interspersed with periods of less strenuous activity, like weapon maintenance or tactical lessons. The exact workout plan of a Roman gladiator is, of course, lost to history, but it was undoubtedly a sophisticated system born from generations of experience. The sun is setting. The final bell rings. You stumble back to your cell, your body humming with exhaustion. You choke down your evening meal of barley mush. There is no entertainment, no conversation. You collapse onto your straw bed. The aches and pains are your constant companions. You fall into a dreamless, heavy sleep, knowing that in just a few short hours, the bell will ring again, and the entire soul-crushing cycle will begin anew. This is not a life, measured out in reps and drills under the ever-watchful eye of the trainer's rod. In the monotonous, brutal rhythm of your daily training, one object begins to take on an almost mystical significance. It's the wooden sword you use for practice, the rudis. It's heavy, clumsy, and splintered from striking the palace thousands of times. It's the instrument of your daily torment, a symbol of your endless drills. But it is also something more. It is the symbol of your only hope. A rudis is not just a training tool. In a very specific context, it represents freedom. For a gladiator who fought with exceptional skill and survived for years in the arena, there was a chance, however slim, of being awarded his freedom. This release wasn't marked by a legal document or a handshake. It was symbolized by the presentation of a wooden sword. To be given the rudis was to be discharged, the dream that every man in the ludus secretly harbored in the deepest corner of his heart. When a gladiator was granted his freedom, it was often done in a public ceremony, right in the middle of the arena. After a particularly spectacular fight, the event organizer, the editor, might, as a gesture of supreme magnanimity, present the veteran gladiator with a rudis. The crowd would roar its approval. It was a moment of high drama, The ultimate fairy tale ending to a career built on blood and sand. The slave was now a free man. But what did this freedom actually mean? The man, now called Arudi Arias, was no longer a slave. He was free to leave the ludus, to walk out the gates and never return. He was no longer legally bound to fight. The brand of infamy, however, was not so easily washed away. While he was no longer a gladiator, he still carried the stigma of having been one. He would likely remain on the fringes of society, a man marked by his violent past. And here's the kicker, the truly bizarre and slightly depressing part of the story. Many gladiators who won their freedom chose to stay. They would remain at the ludus not as fighters, but as trainers. They would become the doctores, the very men who now drill you without mercy. Why would anyone choose to stay in the place of their enslavement? The reasons are complex and deeply human. Outside the walls of the ludus they had nothing. No family, no social standing. The world had moved on without them. Inside the ludus they had a place. They had a skill. They were respected for their experience. They could earn a steady living, far better than they could hope for on the outside. It was a world they understood, a brotherhood of violence that, for all its horrors, was their home. Some famous rudieri even chose to return to the arena. They would sign new contracts as special, high-priced guest stars. They were free men, but the lure of the crowd, the adrenaline of the fight, or simply the vast sums of money offered, was too much to resist. The Emperor Tiberius once paid an enormous sum to entice a few famous retired at one of his games. This choice to return to the very thing that almost killed them is a testament to the powerful psychological hold of the arena. So how common was it to actually receive the rudies? Was it a realistic goal or just a one-in-a million fantasy? This is a point of vigorous debate among historians. The romanticized Hollywood version suggests that every gladiator was fighting for his freedom. The grim reality is that it was exceptionally rare. You had to survive first and foremost. Given the high mortality rates, this was no small feat. Then you had to be not just good but spectacular. A crowd favorite, a champion, a man so valuable and beloved that freeing him was a bigger spectacle than letting him die. For every one man who walked out with a wooden sword, hundreds, if not thousands, were carried out on a stretcher. For you, the rudies you hold every day is a constant, tangible reminder of this duality. It is the tool of your servitude and the symbol of your potential liberation. As you slam it against the palace, the wood vibrating in your tired arm, the dream of that other rudies feels impossibly distant. It's a ghost, a whisper of hope in a place designed to extinguish it. You look over at your trainer, the grizzled Rudi Arias with the dead eyes and the web of scars. He holds a wooden rod, not a sword. He won his freedom. And yet here he is. He never left. The thought is more chilling than any blow you've received all day. Is his fate the best you can possibly hope for? The question hangs in the dusty air unanswered. You are never truly alone, yet you are profoundly lonely. You live, eat, and train surrounded by other men, a packed fraternity of the damned. These are your familiar gladiators. The word familiar is ironic. It means family, but this is a dysfunctional, violent, and deeply complicated one. Your relationships with these men are a constantly shifting landscape of camaraderie, rivalry, suspicion, and survival. Your closest bonds are forged with the men who share your specialization. You are a THRAX, and you train with the other Thracians. You share a trainer, the Dr. THRACUM. You drill the same techniques. You share the same frustrations. You complain about the same small shield and the weird curved sword. There's a natural sense of kinship here. You help each other. You watch another man's sparring match and offer a quiet word of advice later. You're dropping your shield when you land. Watch out for his footwork, he always leads with the left. This isn't pure altruism. A better trained comrade is less likely to get killed, and seeing your teammates succeed offers a sliver of vicarious hope. But this bond is fragile, built on shifting sand. Because while you are brothers in training, you are also direct competitors. The Loneste only has a limited number of slots for a THRAX at the next games. If you both perform well, you are vying for the same opportunities, the same prize money, the same chance to build a name for yourself. A quiet resentment can simmer beneath the surface. You might be friends today, but you are rivals tomorrow. And there's a darker possibility, one that lurks in the back of every honest mind. While gladiators of the same type rarely fought each other in the arena, it was completely unheard of. If two Thracians were the last men standing in a group melee, they would be forced to fight to the finish. The man you shared your meager meal with last night could be the man you have to kill tomorrow. This knowledge creates an invisible wall between you, a boundary of caution that prevents true, unguarded friendship. The relationships with gladiators of other types are even more complex. You look across the yard at the Melons, the heavy infantrymen you are most likely to face in the arena. They are your designated nemesis. You study them. You watch their training, noting their weaknesses. Milo is slow. His massive shield creates blind spots. You learn his moves not out of academic interest, but because your life will one day depend on knowing them better than he does. There is a professional respect, the kind of respect a predator has for its prey, but there is no friendship. He is your future opponent. He is the man the crowd will pay to see you try to kill. And yet, in the quiet moments, in the shared misery of the barracks, humanity flickers through. Archaeological evidence from gladiator cemeteries shows that these men often formed social clubs or guilds called collegiae. They would pool their meager earnings to ensure that if one of them died, he would receive a proper burial and a tombstone. These tombstones are our most personal and poignant sources. A gladiator named Flam A had one that listed his incredible record 34 fights, 21 wins, 9 draws, 4 defeats. Another tombstone was dedicated by a gladiator to his dearest friend and comrade in arms. These inscriptions are a powerful testament to the bonds forged in this brutal environment. They needed each other. In a world that viewed them as property, their shared identity as gladiators was the only real community they had. Were there romantic relationships between gladiators? This is a sensitive topic that historians approach with caution due to the scarcity of direct evidence. Roman society was generally tolerant of same-sex relationships, but the hypermasculine, high-stress environment of the ludus would have created its own unique social dynamics. It's entirely plausible, even likely, that deep emotional and physical bonds were formed between men who had only each other for comfort in a world of constant violence and fear. But it's a part of their lives that remains almost entirely in the shadows, unrecorded by the upper-class writers who provide most of our sources. You find your own small circle, a grizzled veteran who gives you quiet nods of approval, a fellow THRAX with whom you have an unspoken understanding. You are not friends in the way you once understood the word. You cannot afford that kind of vulnerability. You are allies. You are survivors. You watch each other's backs. You share what little you have, and you know that any one of you could be gone tomorrow. It's a fragile, desperate kind of family, but it's the only one you have left. One day in the training yard it happens. A moment of carelessness, a parry that's a fraction of a second too slow. Your sparring partner's wooden sword, heavy and unforgiving, smashes into your forearm. You hear a sickening crack. An agony you've never felt before shoots up your arm. You collapse to the sand, clutching your limb, the world turning into a grey, hazy tunnel of pain. Your fighting career, your very life, seems to be over. But you are not dragged out and left to die. That would be a waste of an investment. Instead, two attendants rush over and carefully lift you. They carry you away from the training yard, away from the barracks, and into the one building in the ludus that is a place of both hope and dread, the infirmary. You are about to meet the most important man in the school, apart from the Lawniste himself. You are about to meet the doctor. The infirmary is surprisingly clean. It smells sharply of dried herbs, vinegar, and antiseptic smoke. Tools are laid out neatly on a wooden table, probes, scalpels, forceps, and saws, all gleaming in the dim light. The man who approaches you is not a brute like the trainers. He is older with intelligent, focused eyes. He examines your arm with a gentle, practiced touch that belies the brutal environment. He is a medicus, and he is a medicus, and he is very, very good at his job. The top gladiator schools employed some of the best doctors in the Roman Empire. This wasn't out of compassion. It was pure, cold-hearted economics. You are a valuable asset, and your body is the source of all potential profit. Letting you die from a preventable injury or infection is like letting a prize racehorse perish from a treatable disease. It's just bad business. So the honest A invests heavily in top tier to protect his assets. The famous physician Galen, one of the most important doctors in all of ancient history, began his career as a medicus at a gladiator school in his hometown of Pergamon. His time there gave him an unparalleled and frankly gruesome opportunity. He called the wounds of gladiators windows into the body. In an era when human dissection was a major taboo, treating deep sword wounds gave doctors like Galen a direct look at human anatomy, muscles, tendons, even organs in a way that few others could ever experience. The knowledge he gained patching up broken fighters went on to form the foundation of Western medical theory for over 1,000 years. Your suffering, and the suffering of thousands like you, advanced the course of science, a cold comfort at best. The doctor works quickly and efficiently. He sets the bone in your arm, the pain making you cry out, a sound that is ignored. He prepares a splint and wraps the arm tightly. He then moves on to treating the open wound where the bone has broken the skin. He cleans it meticulously with vinegar and water. He applies a poultice of herbs known for their antiseptic properties. He understands that the real killer isn't the break itself, but the infection that could follow. Gangrene and sepsis were the silent assassins that claimed more gladiators than the sword. A small, untreated cut could fester and lead to a slow, agonizing death. The full extent of the gladiators' medical knowledge is still being uncovered, and it's a subject of ongoing research. Did they understand concepts like the sterilization of instruments? Some evidence suggests they did, using fire or vinegar to clean their tools. They certainly had a sophisticated understanding of wound care, diet, and physical therapy for rehabilitation. Analysis of gladiator skeletons reveals a fascinating pattern. They have an unusually high number of healed or healing fractures compared to the general population. This means two things: they got injured a lot, but they also had doctors who were skilled enough to patch them up and get them back on their feet. You are given a vile-tasting brew of poppy extract to manage the pain, and you are confined to the infirmary for days. It's a strange, quiet limbo. You are excused from training, but you are also useless. You watch the doctor tend to the other patients, a man with a deep gash in his thigh, another with a dislocated shoulder, a third burning with a fever from an infected wound. The doctor treats them all with the same detached, professional efficiency, keeping the fighting machines in working order. Your arm begins to heal. The doctor gives you specific exercises to do, gently at first, then with increasing intensity. He understands rehabilitation. He knows how to rebuild the strength in your atrophied muscles. He is not trying to make you comfortable again. And as you slowly recover, a chilling thought dawdles in your mind. This man's incredible skill, his deep knowledge of the human body, is all directed at one goal: to repair you just enough so that you can be sent back into the arena to be broken all over again. Your arm has healed, a dull ache and a new scar the only reminders of the injury. You're back in the training yard, back in the grind. A new energy is buzzing through the ludus. The Laniste has secured a major contract. A wealthy politician is sponsoring a huge series of games among us in the provincial capital. This is a big deal. Big games mean big crowds, big stakes, and big money. And you, Atticus the Thracian, have been chosen to be on the fight card. Suddenly, your existence is not just about survival. It's about money, of course, but the vast sums that are now swirling around your upcoming performance. The entire business of gladiatorial combat was built on a complex web of finance, and at the center of it all was gambling. The moment the matchups are announced, the betting begins. In the taverns and bathhouses of the city, odds are being calculated. Your name is on people's lips, not just as a celebrity, but as a financial prospect. Atticus the Thracian versus Draco the Emur Miller. Atticus is quicker, but Draco has the better defense. I'll put 5 sesterces on Draco to win, but I'll bet another to that Atticus draws first blood. The betting on gladiatorial contests was rampant, sophisticated, and a massive part of the Roman economy. It was the ancient equivalent of sports betting, and it was an obsession for people from all social classes. Your Loniste is, in essence, a promotion bookie all rolled into one. He negotiates your appearance fee with the editor sponsoring the games. A novice like you might fetch a modest sum. A superstar champion could command a fortune. But the real money for the Loniste often came from the side bets. He knows you better than anyone. He knows your strengths, your weaknesses, your current physical and mental state. He has the ultimate insider information, and you can be sure he is using it to place his own wagers. Does he bet on you to win, or does he bet on you to lose, perhaps having matched you against an opponent he knows you can't beat, just to get good odds you'll never know? You are a pawn in his financial games. This introduces a deeply cynical element to your fight. Your Nista's primary goal is to make money, not necessarily for you to win. Sometimes, a spectacular loss was more profitable than a boring win. A long, dramatic fight that ends in your honorable death could generate more betting action and please the crowd more than a quick, efficient victory. This led to a pervasive suspicion of fixed fights. How common were fixed fights? Or pogen, ain on legiti, may this is a hot topic for historians, and the evidence is tantalizing but inconclusive. The Roman public was certainly paranoid about it. Writers of the time often complained about matchups that seemed predetermined or fighters who didn't seem to be trying their best. It's easy to see how it could happen. A Loniste could order his gladiator to take a for a dramatic moment, or two Loniste could conspire, agreeing to have their fighters put on a long, bloody, but ultimately non-fatal show to maximize the entertainment value without risking their valuable assets. Proving it, however, is nearly impossible. There are no surviving documents that say, here's the receipt for the bribe. The whispers and accusations, however, were a constant part of the gladiator world. Even the objects associated with you have a monetary value. Those clay lamps with your image on them, they are merchandise, sold outside the arena. The program for the games, a sort of painted poster or inscribed leaflet listing the combatants, is a collector's item. You are a brand, a product, and every aspect of your public persona is being monetized. A few days before you're set to leave for the games, you see the Loniste walking through the yard with the event sponsor, the editor. The politician looks you over, the same way the Loniste did when he first bought you, deciding on a narrative for the crowd. The quick, agile Thracian against the strong, stoic Milo. You are the star of a show, the main character in a story that has been written, produced, and financed by other people. Your role is simple: to bleed, to fight, and if necessary to die on cue. The roar of the crowd is not just for blood, it's the sound of thousands of winning and losing bets, of money changing hands. Your life has a price tag, and on the day of the games, everyone will be waiting to see if the investment pays off. The night before you are to be transported to the city of the games, a strange and unsettling event takes place. The mood in the ludus shifts. There's a nervous energy, a tension that's different from the usual daily grind. The guards unlock the cells of all the gladiators scheduled to fight, including you and your opponent for the upcoming match, Draco the Milo. You are led not to the mess hall, but to a specially prepared dining area. The tables are laden with food that you haven't seen since your life before the ludus. There are roasted meats, cheeses, fruits, and most importantly, free-flowing wine. This is the singly bara, the free dinner. It is a traditional ritual, a final feast for the condemned. But it is not a private affair. The public is invited to attend. The room is filled with a bizarre mix of people. There are grim-faced gamblers, coming to get a final look at the horses before they place their bets. They watch your every move, trying to gauge your confidence, your health. Is Atticus eating well? Does he look nervous? There are morbidly curious citizens, drawn to the spectacle of watching men who are about to face death. And there are the groupies, the gladiator fanatics, who look at the star fighters with a mixture of awe and desire. You sit there in the midst of this circus, feeling like an animal in a zoo. You are on display. Your every bite and sip analyzed. You look across the table and see Draco. HES eating methodically, his face a mask of stoicism, giving nothing away to the prying eyes. You've spent weeks studying this man from a distance, and now, You sit across from him, sharing a meal. It's an intimate and deeply uncomfortable moment. Tomorrow, you will try to kill each other. The purpose of the scenery bearer was twofold. For the public, it was a promotional event, a way to hype the upcoming games and fuel the betting frenzy. It was a chance to see the gladiators up close, not as armored, faceless killers, but as human beings, which, paradoxically, made their potential deaths in the arena the next day even more titillating. For the gladiators, its purpose is more ambiguous. Was it a final, generous meal, an act of kindness before the end, or was it a more cynical psychological ploy, a way to soften you up, to give you a taste of the good life right before you're thrown back into the slaughterhouse, making the prospect of survival that much more desperate? Here's a small, weird detail that has been preserved in ancient sources. Some gladiators used this public dinner as an opportunity to make arrangements for their families or settle their affairs. In the unlikely event they had managed to accumulate any personal savings, they might pass messages through a sympathetic guard or even a fan trying to ensure their wife or children would be taken care of. They would make their wills, so to speak, in the shadow of their own impending funeral. You try to eat. The rich food feels heavy in your stomach, which is already churning with anxiety. The wind does little to calm your nerves. You see some of the veteran gladiators embracing the moment. They laugh loudly, boasting of their past victories, playing to the crowd. They are performing, even here. It's part of the brand, the image of the fearless, larger-than-life warrior. Others, like you, are quiet, withdrawn, lost in their own thoughts. You think about your old life. The stupid mistake that landed you here. Every memory is a fresh stab of pain. What was the true atmosphere of these dinners? Was it a somber, funereal affair or a wild, debauched party? The historical accounts, mostly from moralizing writers like Seneca, tend to paint them as vulgar spectacles of excess. But he was a critic of the games. It's likely the mood varied greatly. For a high-profile event in Rome, it might have been a boisterous party. For a small provincial game, it might have been a much more quiet and grim occasion. The reality for the gladiators themselves was probably a confusing mix of fear, bravado, and a desperate attempt to find a moment's pleasure or peace before the dawn. The dinner ends. The guards herd you back to your cells. The taste of roasted pork and good wine still lingers in your mouth, a stark contrast to the usual bland barley mush. It feels like a cruel joke. You lie on your straw mattress, but sleep is impossible. Your mind races, playing out 100 different versions of the fight to come. The scenery bearer wasn't a comfort. It was a reminder of everything you've lost, and everything you're about to lose. The free dinner is over. The only thing left to pay is the bill, and it's due tomorrow in the arena. The morning of the games arrives not with the familiar clang of the training bell, but with a palpable electric tension. There's no practice today. You are given a light meal, and then the process of arming begins. Attendants, slaves of the ludus, help you into your gear. The cold metal of the greaves on your shins, the familiar weight of the padded arm guard, the tight grip of the belt around your waist. Lastly, they hand you your helmet, the bronze griffin seeming to stare back at you with lifeless eyes. You don't put it on yet, that comes later. You and the other gladiators are chained together, not in a miserable line as when you were first brought to the school, but in a carefully arranged procession. You are loaded onto carts and transported from the ludus to the city center. The journey is a cacophony of sound. As you approach the amphitheater, the streets are thronged with people. It's a holiday. The entire city has shut down for the games. They cheer, they shout your name, they throw flowers. It's a hero's welcome for a man who is legally less than human. The irony is so thick you could choke on it. You arrive at the amphitheater and are led through a massive gate, the Porta Pompei, the gate of procession. You are marshaled in the tunnels beneath the stands, a dark, cool labyrinth that smells of damp earth, wild animals, and fear. You can hear the roar of the crowd above you, a deep, primal sound that reverberates through the stone. It sounds like the ocean, like a thunderstorm, like 1,000 beasts roaring at once. Then the moment arrives. The trumpets blare, the massive gates swing open, and you march out into the blinding sunlight of the arena. This is the pompa, the grand opening ceremony. It is pure theater, a spectacular parade designed to whip the crowd into a frenzy. It's not just the gladiators, priests, and attendants carrying statues of the gods. The editor, the politician sponsoring the games, rides in a chariot, beaming and waving to the crowd, soaking in their adulation. He is the star of the show, and you are his supporting cast. You march in a precise order, a hierarchy of death. The lower-ranked fighters and those involved in the morning's warm-up acts go first. The main event gladiators, the stars like you, come last, to build anticipation. You walk the circuit of the arena, a full lap around the sand. You hold your weapons at a presentable angle. You hold your head high, a mask of fierce confidence carefully arranged on your face. You are a product being displayed to the consumers one last time before they get to see it in action. The pompa was an essential part of the Roman games, a tradition borrowed from even older Etruscan funeral rites. The original gladiatorial combats were believed to be a form of blood sacrifice to honor the dead at the funerals of great men. Over time, they lost their religious significance and morphed into pure entertainment, but they retained these ritualistic trappings. The parade was a spectacle of power, the power of the editor who could afford such an event. The power of Rome, which could command men from all corners of the empire to fight and die for its amusement. You scan the crowd. It's a sea of faces, a perfect cross-section of Roman society. In the front rows, on cushioned marble seats, are the senators and equestrians, the wealthy elite in their fine white togas. Above them are the ordinary citizens, the plebs, packed onto wooden benches. And at the very top, in the nosebleed section, are the women and the slaves. All of them, from the highest senator to the lowest slave, are united in this moment by a single, bloodthirsty desire. Here's a small, curious detail that is often overlooked. Sometimes the pompa included the display of the very prizes the gladiators were competing for. It could be a beautiful, ornate new helmet, a finely crafted shield, or most commonly a purse heavy with coins. They would be paraded around the arena, a glittering reminder of what victory could bring, dangling the prospect of wealth and glory in front of you and the audience. Did the gladiators resent the pompa as a final humiliation, or did they embrace it as their moment in the spotlight? This is a question of psychology that is impossible to answer definitively. It was likely both. For a veteran champion, it might have been an ego boost, a chance to soak in the adoration of his fans. He might have had a signature move, a way of saluting the crowd that was part of his personal brand. For a terrified novice, it was probably a death march, every step a step closer to a terrifying unknown. You are probably somewhere in between. A part of you is electrified by the raw energy of the crowd, by the sound of them chanting your name. Another part of you is hollow with terror. The parade concludes. You are now standing in the center of the arena, the hot and under your feet. The editor gives his opening remarks. The preliminary events are about to begin. Your fight is still an hour or two away. You are laid back into the cool darkness of the tunnels to wait. But the image of the crowd is burned into your mind. You have seen your audience. You have seen the thousands of eyes that will soon be watching you, judging you, and deciding whether you deserve to live or die. The show has begun. The waiting is a unique form of torture. You sit on a cold stone bench in the dim light of the gladiators' waiting area, the Espoliarium, which lies just out of sight of the arena floor. You can hear everything. The roar of the crowd, the clash of weapons from the morning's lesser fights, perhaps a mock battle or animal hunts. Every sound is a prelude to your own moment of trial. The air is thick with the smell of sweat, fear, and something else, the metallic tang of fresh blood. An official comes to get you. It's time. You and your opponent, Draco, are led to the edge of the tunnel. The sun is now high in the sky, beating down on the sand. You can see the editor's box, where the sponsor of the game sits in all his glory, often alongside the local governor or even, at the Colosseum, the emperor himself. Now comes one of the most famous moments in gladiator lore, a scene immortalized in countless movies and books. You and the other gladiators of the main event are expected to raise your weapons and salute the editor. The classic, dramatic line echoes in your mind of a imperator moritaria te salutant. Hail, Emperor, we who are about to die salute you. It's a moment of supreme, tragic grandeur, The ultimate statement of fatalistic acceptance. But here's the thing. Did this actually happen? Almost certainly not, at least not as a regular occurrence. This famous phrase is recorded by the historian Suetonius as a one-time event. It wasn't spoken by professional gladiators, but by a group of convicts and prisoners of war who were condemned to die in a staged naval battle, a enigmatic, on the Fucine Lake for the entertainment of the Emperor Claudius. They were amateurs, condemned men with no hope of survival, and their salute was a desperate, ironic cry. Claudius, known for being a bit of a strange and unpredictable ruler, is said to have replied, "Aut non or not," which the condemned men misinterpreted as a pardon. They refused to fight until the emperor personally coaxed and threatened them into battle. So, the most famous line associated with gladiators was likely never spoken by them. What probably happened was a much more standard, less poetic salute. You would raise your weapon and simply shout of a editor, "Hail, sponsor," or something similar. It was a sign of respect and acknowledgement, the formal start of a contest, not a collective suicide pact, but the moritariety encapsulating the romanticized tragedy of the gladiator that it has stuck in our collective imagination ever since. The debate over this salute is a classic example of how history can be shaped by a single powerful story. Is it possible Suetonius was wrong, and it was a more common phrase, or did later Romans, and then Hollywood, simply pick up on this one dramatic quote and misapply it to all gladiators because it made for better drama? The overwhelming consensus leans towards the latter. The daily reality was likely far less poetic. So you don't recite a dramatic line about dying. You offer a simple, professional salute. You are a performer, and this is the start of your performance. You and Draco stand before the editor's box. The crowd hushes for a moment. An official announces the match Paticus the Thracian, fighting for the Ludus of Gladiators, versus Draco the Mur Milo, from the Ludus of Lentils. The crowd roars its approval. The betting odds are probably flashing through the minds of 1,000 spectators. Then, you turn to face each other. You pull your helmet on. The world shrinks to a narrow slit of vision. The roar of the crowd becomes a muffled, distant thunder. All you can see is him, Draco. His heavy shield, his twisted helmet that hides his face completely. He is no longer the man you shared a meal with last night. He is a collection of targets. He is a collection of targets. He is the person standing between you and your next breath. A trumpet sounds a single, sharp blast. That's the signal. There are no more rituals, no more words. The time for spectacle is over. The time for fighting has begun. You raise your small shield, your curved seeker feeling light and deadly in your hand. You begin to circle each other on the hot sand, the dance of death about to commence. The moment the trumpet sounds, the world outside your helmet dissolves. The roar of 80,000 spectators, a sound that shook the very foundations of the building just moments ago, fades into a dull background hum, like the sea crashing on a distant shore. Your universe is now the roughly circular patch of sand you stand on, the blazing sun above, and the man in front of you. Your senses are on fire, overwhelmed and yet hyper-focused. The heat is the first thing you notice. The sun beats down on the sand, and the glare is intense. The metal of your helmet and greaves becomes hot to the touch. Sweat stings your eyes, and your padded linen arm guard is already starting to feel heavy and soaked. Then there's the smell. It's a primal cocktail: the dry, dusty scent of the sand, the sharp tang of your own nervous sweat, the faint, coppery aroma of old blood that seems to be permanently baked into the ground, and underneath it all, the strange, musky odor of the wild animals that were hunted here this morning, a scent that still clings to the air. You circle Draco, and he circles you. The sand crunches under your feet. It's deeper than you expected, and it shifts with every step, a treacherous surface that can throw you off balance in a heartbeat. This isn't the firm, packed earth of the training yard. This is a living, unstable thing. You have to be mindful of your footing with every single movement. You are a THRIX. Speed is your ally. Draco the Mur Milo is a fortress of armor and shield. His strategy is to wait, to let you wear yourself out trying to breach his defenses. Your strategy is to be a phantom, to dart in, score a cut, and get out before he can bring his superior strength and his deadly gladius to bear. You feint to your left. Draco's massive shield, his scutum, shifts to cover. He's good. He's not overcommitting. His movements are economical, patient. You see the crowd as a blur of color at the edge of your vision. You can feel their collective gaze like a physical weight. They are analyzing your every move. A successful lunge gets a roar of approval. A clumsy step earns a groan of disappointment. You are not just fighting an opponent, you are fighting for the approval of a massive, fickle beast. The sensory experience of the arena is something historians try to reconstruct through a variety of clues. The architecture of the amphitheater is designed to amplify sound. The orientation of the arenas, often built to catch the sun in a particular way, and the descriptions in ancient texts all paint a picture of an overwhelming environment. The roar was deafening. The roar was deafening. The emotional intensity was off the charts. It was a carefully engineered sensory assault, designed to maximize the excitement and the terror for everyone involved. Suddenly, Draco lunges. It's faster than you expected. The big man can move. You leap back, the tip of his gladius slicing the air just inches from your exposed chest. The crowd roars. First blood almost went to the MUR Milo. Your heart hammers against your ribs. That was close. The sheer killing intent behind his movement was something the wooden swords of the training yard could never replicate. Here's a small, weird detail about the arena floor. It was often covered in a special type of sand, called arena, which is where we get the modern word arena. This sand was excellent at soaking up blood, which kept the footing from getting too slippery and, just as importantly, cleaned the stage for the next event. The Romans were, above all, practical showmen. They understood that you couldn't have a good show if the performers were constantly slipping in the gore of the previous act. Were the gladiators aware of the crowd during the fight, or were they in a state of pure tunnel vision? This is a question that touches on the psychology of combat sports, and the answer is likely both. A novice might be completely overwhelmed, his senses shutting down. A veteran, however, probably learned to use the crowd. A sudden roar from a certain section might alert him to an attack coming from his blind spot. He might learn to play to the audience, to time a dramatic move to get the biggest reaction. The most skilled fighters were not just warriors, they were masters of stagecraft, using the entire environment as part of their performance. You see an opening. As Draco recovers from his lunge, his shield is slightly out of position. You dart in, not with your sword, but with your foot. You kick a spray of sand into the narrow eye slit of his helmet. It's a dirty trick, one they don't teach you at the palace, but one you learn by watching the veterans. For a split second, he's blinded. You don't go for a kill. You use your curved seeker to slash downwards, slicing deep into the muscle of his sword arm. Blood wells up, bright crimson against his skin. The crowd explodes. You've scored the first hit. It's not a disabling blow, but it's a significant one. You leap back, your breath coming in ragged gasps, the adrenaline singing in your veins. You've wounded the fortress, but you've also made him angry. The fight has just entered a new, more dangerous phase. The fight becomes a grueling bloody ballet. Your cut on Draco's arm enrages him, but it also slows him down. HES more cautious with his sword arm now, and you press the advantage. You dart in and out, landing small cuts, scoring points with the crowd. But it's exhausting work. Your lungs are on fire, and the small shield feels like it's made of lead. Draco, for his part, is a wall of patience. He weathers your attacks, his big shield absorbing most of the punishment. HES waiting for you to make a mistake. And then you do. You overextend on a lunge, trying to end it. Your foot slips in the sand. For a fraction of a second, you're off balance. It's all the opening Draco needs. He doesn't attack with his sword. He slams into you with the full weight of his body and his massive shield. It's like being hit by a freight train. You crash to the ground. The wind knocked out of you, your helmet ringing like a bell. Before you can recover, his foot is on your chest, and the point of his gladius is at your throat. The entire amphitheater falls silent, This is it, the moment of decision. But the fight isn't necessarily over. This is one of the biggest misconceptions about gladiatorial combat. It was not always a fight to the death. In fact, in the arena was the exception rather than the rule. Why simple economics? You are a valuable, highly trained asset. The non-iste has spent a fortune on your training, food, and medical care. Killing you is a financial loss. It was often more profitable for a gladiator to be defeated, spared, and live to fight another day. This led to a complex system of rules and officiating that we often miss in the Hollywood versions. In the arena with you is a referee, or sometimes two. He is the Summa Rudis, named for the long staff Rudis he carries. He is often a retired gladiator, a man who knows all the rules and tricks. He has been watching the fight closely. Now, he steps forward. He doesn't stop the fight, but he ensures the final moment proceeds according to protocol. Draco, standing over you, does not kill you immediately. He looks to you. You have a choice. You can fight on, a futile struggle that will almost certainly end in your death. Or you can surrender, is to drop your weapon and shield and raise a single finger, the index finger of your left hand. It is a gesture of appeal, an admission of defeat. It is the ad digitum to the finger. Your mind races. Is there any hope of escape? No. He has you. To continue fighting is suicide. With a surge of shame and a desperate will to live, you release your grip on your seeker. The curved blade clatters onto the sand. You slowly, deliberately raise your finger. You have officially lost. But you are not dead yet. The power to decide your fate now shifts away from the combatants and into the hands of one man, the editor, the sponsor of the games. Here's a bizarre detail that speaks to the performative nature of it all. Sometimes, if a fight was particularly boring or the fighters seemed lazy, the crowd would shout for the trainers and their whips to be sent in. They would literally have the trainers run into the arena and whip the gladiators to make them fight more aggressively. It was a clear signal that this was, first and foremost, entertainment. What were the exact rules of engagement? How were points scored or victors decided? If no one was killed, this is an area where historical evidence is frustratingly vague. Unlike modern sports, there was no official universal rule book. The rules were likely set by the editor for each specific game. A victor might be declared after a certain number of wounds, or if one combatant was disarmed, or simply when the referee decided one fighter had a decisive, inescapable advantage. As Draco has over you now, it was likely a judgment call, based on creating the most dramatic and satisfying conclusion for the audience. The Summa Rudis now looks to the editor's box. Draco looks to the editor. The entire crowd turns, their thousands of eyes all focusing on that one man. You lie there on the sand helpless, your life hanging on a single gesture. The noise of the crowd begins to swell again, a wave of shouts and opinions. They have seen the fight, they have seen your surrender, and now they are ready to deliver their verdict. You lie on the hot sand, the point of Draco's sort of cold pressure at your throat. Your fate is no longer in your hands or even his. It rests with the crowd, and ultimately, with the editor. The roar of the spectators becomes a chaotic symphony of demands. Some are shouting, "Mit! Let him go! Spare him!" Others are screaming, "Ayu Gula! Slay him! Cut his throat!" The air is electric with the power of the mob. The editor, from his shaded box, watches this display. HES not just a spectator, HES a politician. His goal is to please the people. A popular decision will win him favor and votes. An unpopular one could make him a pariah. He holds up a hand, and a tense silence falls over the amphitheater. He will now poll the audience. This is the moment of the famous thumbs up or thumbs down. But what did that gesture actually mean? This is one of the most enduring undebated myths of the Roman world. The popular image, cemented by countless paintings and movies, most notably the 19th century painting Polus Verso by Jean Leon Garum, is that thumbs up meant life, and thumbs down meant death. The reality is almost certainly the opposite, or at least far more complicated. The Latin phrase for the gesture is Polus Verso, which literally means with a turned thumb. The problem is, which way was it turned? There is no single, definitive ancient source that clearly describes the gesture. However, most modern historians believe that the kill signal was not thumbs down, but thumbs up. A raised thumb, pointing towards the sky, was thought to resemble a drawn sword, signaling the victor to deliver the final blow. So what was the gesture for life? It was likely a closed fist, with the thumb pressed down inside it, a gesture called polus embrema. This was meant to symbolize a sheathed sword. The idea was to hide the thumb's word away, signaling that the sword should be put away and the loser's life spared. A simple thumbs down as we know it today might not have meant anything at all. The debate over the thumb gesture is a classic example of how a powerful visual image can override historical reality. The Polus Versa painting was so influential that its interpretation became fact in the popular imagination, and Hollywood eagerly adopted it. Scholars continue to argue over the nuances, analyzing obscure texts and gestures in Roman art. But the consensus remains that our modern pop culture understanding is probably wrong. The editor sees a divided crowd. You fought bravely. You wounded your opponent. You didn't cower. You surrendered honorably only when the situation was hopeless. The shouts for Mitt are strong. The editor makes his calculation. Sparing you is the popular choice. It makes him look magnanimous. It also means you can be passed up and fight a game he might sponsor, saving him the cost of finding a new gladiator. It's good politics and good business. He makes the gesture, a closed fist, the thumb tucked away, polus embrema, knife. A wave of relief so profound it almost makes you pass out washes over you. Draco removes his sword from your throat and his foot from your chest. He offers you a hand and pulls you to your feet. It's a gesture of professional respect. The fight is over. Attendants rush into the arena to escort you both out. Draco is led away to have his arm treated by the doctors. He is the victor, and he will receive the prize money and the glory. You are the loser. You are the loser. You are led, stumbling and bleeding towards a different gate. It's a dark, ominous-looking exit known as the Porta Libitinensis, the Gate of Death. It was named after the Roman goddess of funerals, and it's the gate through which the dead bodies were usually dragged. Even though you have been spared, you must exit through the Gate of the Dead, a final, grim reminder of how close you came. As you limp through the dark tunnel, the roar of the crowd celebrating Draco's victory behind you, you are overwhelmed by a confusing mix of emotions: shame at your defeat, gratitude for your life, and a bone-deep dread of having to do this all over again. You lost the fight, but you won the grim lottery of the Emperor's Thumb. You stumble out of the Gate of Death and into the bowels of the amphitheater. The adrenaline that flooded your body during the fight vanishes, leaving behind a deep, bone-crushing exhaustion and a constellation of pain. Your own minor cuts, which you barely felt in the heat of battle, are now throbbing. Your body is a symphony of aches from where you were slammed to the ground. You are defeated, but you are alive, and the consequences of both victory and defeat are now becoming clear. You are taken straight to the medical station, a temporary infirmary set up for the games. The same kind of professional, detached care you receive at the Ludus is administered here. A doctor, perhaps even the same one who fixed your broken arm, cleans your wounds. He stitches up a nasty gash on your leg, the needle pulling your skin together with a practiced efficiency. He gives you another foul-tasting herbal drink for the pain and, to ward off infection, physical price of your survival. Across the room you see Draco the victor. He is also being treated by a doctor, his arm being carefully bandaged. He receives his prize, a victory palm frond, a laurel crown, and, most importantly, a plate or bag heavy with coins. This is the winner's purse. He may also receive additional gifts from wealthy admirers in the crowd. He has won money, glory, and a significant boost to his reputation. His value to his lawn-estate has just skyrocketed. And what is your prize? Nothing. You get to live. That is your reward. That is your reward. That is your reward. There is no prize money for an honorable loss. You have cost your lawn-estate money today. He had to pay for your transport and upkeep, and he gets no return on that investment from your fight. He may have even lost money on the side bets he placed. You will return to the ludus in disgrace. Your status diminished. Your status diminished. Your next fight, if you get one, will be on a less prestigious card, for lower stakes. But the most significant cost of victory and defeat is not measured in coins or status. It's the psychological toll. The mental health of gladiators is a subject ancient sources rarely touch on, but it is impossible to ignore. Imagine the mind of the victor Draco. He is celebrated, but he knows he came close to losing. He must live with the fact that he was prepared to kill you, a man he trained alongside. He has to process the violence, the adrenaline, and the roar of the crowd, and then somehow sleep at night, knowing he'll have to do it all again. The pressure to maintain his winning streak will be immense. Your own mental state is a chaotic wreck. You are flooded with the shame of defeat. You replay the fight over and over in your mind. The slip in the sand, the moment of helplessness. You are also grappling with the visceral memory of the fight, the terror of imminent death. This kind of experience leaves scars that no doctor can see or stitch up. We would call it PTSD today. The Romans had no such concept. You were simply expected to be tough to endure. Any sign of mental weakness would be seen as cowardice. Here's a small but telling detail found on some gladiator tombstones. Sometimes the inscription will mention that a gladiator was killed by a lucky blow. This phrasing suggests a need to rationalize defeat, even in death. It wasn't that the fallen gladiator was less skilled, it was that his opponent got lucky. This hints at the immense pride and ego tied up in their performance, and how devastating a loss could be to their identity. How did gladiators cope with this constant psychological pressure and trauma? This is a realm of historical speculation, as we have no surviving diaries or psychological profiles. Some probably developed a hard shell of cynicism. Others might have turned to religion, praying to Nemesis, the goddess of fortune and divine retribution, whose shrines were often found near amphitheaters. Many likely found solace in the grim brotherhood of the barracks, sharing their experiences with the only other people in the world who could possibly understand. And it is tragically likely that many simply broke down. Suicide, though rarely recorded, was almost certainly a common, unglamorous end for those who could no longer bear the weight of their existence. You are patched up. The doctors have done their work. You will be sent back to the ludus to heal, to recover, and to be prepared for the next time your name is called. You won the right to live, but you have to return to the life of a slave, now branded with the stigma of a public loss. Draco won the fight, and he has to live with the pressure of being a champion. In the arena, there is a clear winner and a loser, but in the aftermath, as you both sit in the blood-scented gloom of the infirmary, it's hard to tell who has truly paid the higher price. You're back at the ludus. The sting of your public defeat fades into the familiar, monotonous sake of daily training. You've seen men come and go. You've seen champions rise and fall. You've seen men carried out of the arena on stretchers, and you've seen a lucky few walk out on their own 2 feet, spared like you were. And through it all, one question gnaws at the back of your mind, a tiny, flickering candle of hope in the overwhelming darkness. Can I ever get out of here? The dream of the Rudies, the wooden sword of freedom, seems more distant than ever after a loss. It's a prize reserved for champions, for the superstars who capture the imagination of the public in the favor of the powerful. So, what does the path to that freedom actually look like? It's a brutal, unforgiving climb with very few handholds. First, and most obviously, you have to survive. This is the great filter that eliminates the vast majority of gladiators. The mortality rate for a gladiator is a subject of intense historical debate, as the data is incomplete and likely changed over the centuries. Early in the Republic, when fights were more often to the death, the odds were terrible. By the height of the Empire, when the economic value was higher, survival rates improved. Some studies of gladiator tombstones suggest a mortality rate of around 1 in 10 per fight. Others argue it could be as high as 1 in 3, especially for major events. Whatever the exact number, the cumulative odds were not in your favor. If you fight 10 times with a 1 in 10 chance of dying each time, your chances of surviving all 10 fights are slim. Let's say you beat the odds. You are a survivor. Now, you have to be a winner. Not just a survivor who gets spared, but a consistent victor. You need to rack up an impressive record. 10 wins, 2030, the tombstone of the famous gladiator Flem. A boasted of 21 victories in 34 fights. This was seen as an exceptionally long and successful career. You would need to achieve something similar. This requires not just skill and strength, but an incredible amount of luck. You need to avoid career-ending injuries, you need to avoid facing a truly superior opponent, and you need to avoid displeasing the crowd on a bad day. Even if you achieve all that, it's still not enough. Your freedom is not something you earn automatically. It is a gift bestowed at the whim of a l'honnête or the editor. You can't just cash in your victories for rudies. You have to be so popular, so beloved by the crowd, that freeing you becomes a grand, peer-worthy gesture. Your freedom is a piece of theatre, the final act in the drama of your career. An editor might free a beloved champion at the end of a long day of games to send the crowd home happy. A.L. Honeste might free an aging, but still famous gladiator as a reward for years of profitable service, knowing he can then hire him back as a trainer. Here's a small poignant detail about the nature of this freedom for condemned criminals like you. Sentenced ad ludum. The path was even harder. A volunteer gladiator signed a contract for a set period, maybe 3 to 5 years. If he survived his term, he was technically free, though he would likely be pressured to sign on for another. But you, the Damatus, weren't just an honorable discharge, it was a commutation of a death sentence. It required a higher authority to overturn the original court ruling. This made true freedom for men like you exceptionally rare. So, was there any other way out? Could a gladiator by his own freedom, the concept of your human Roman law allowed slaves to own property and save money, and it's possible this applied to some gladiators. A superstar champion who received large purses and gifts might, in theory, save enough to purchase his own manumission from the l'honnête. However, the l'honnête would have to agree, and the price would be astronomical, likely far more than the gladiator's market value, to compensate for the loss of future earnings. There are a few inscriptions that mention a gladiator buying his own rudies, but these are very rare. For the average fighter, it was a financial impossibility. You look at the trainers, the rudierie, walking the yard. They are the success stories. They survived. They won, they were freed. And now they spend their days in the same place that was their prison, teaching a new generation of slaves how to bleed and die effectively. The rudies gave them their legal freedom, but it didn't give them a new life. They are ghosts, haunting their own path. The path to freedom is a razor's edge. It demands near superhuman endurance, skill, luck, and popularity. For every one man who walked that path to its end, countless others fell along the way. The rudies is not a goal. And as you pick up your heavy wooden practice sword for another round of drills, you understand that the most realistic thing to hope for is not the rudies of freedom, but the mercy of the crowd and the gesture of a hidden thumb. In this relentlessly masculine world of sweat, sand, and steel, women exist largely on the periphery as ghosts, fantasies, or frightening symbols of power. Your interactions with them are rare and fraught with the complexities of your debased status. They represent a world you can see but cannot touch, a reminder of a life of normalcy that has been stolen from you. The most visible women are the ones in the stands. From the top tiers of the amphitheater, the nosebleed section where women were traditionally seated, they are a colorful but distant part of the roaring beast that is the crowd. But some women, the wealthy and powerful, sit closer. You catch glimpses of them in the front rows, patrician ladies in fine silks, their faces painted, watching the violence with an intensity that is both thrilling and terrifying. For some of these women, you're the object of a strange and taboo fascination. Gladiators, despite being social outcasts, were the rock stars and sex symbols of their day. Graffiti scrawled on the walls of Pompeii makes this abundantly clear. One famous inscription reads, "Saladas the Thracian, the thrill and desire of all the girls." You are a symbol of raw, untamed masculinity, a dangerous fantasy utterly removed from their staid, respectable lives with senators and businessmen. This admiration is, however, a double-edged sword. It's a form of celebrity, but it's dehumanizing. They don't desire you, the man. They desire the idea of you, the blood-soaked, dangerous persona created in the arena. This fascination sometimes spilled over into reality. The Roman historian Tacitus tells the scandalous story of a senator's wife, Epia, who ran off with a gladiator named Sergius. She abandoned her husband, her family, and her reputation to follow this aging, scarred, and battered fighter to Egypt. To Roman high society, this was the ultimate disgrace, a shocking betrayal of her class and duty, for you and the other men in the ludus. Stories like this are whispered legends, a testament to the strange power you hold over the very people who own you. But these affairs were rare, dangerous, and almost always ended badly for everyone involved. Then there are the women inside the ludus. These are not noble ladies seeking a thrill. They are slaves, just like you. They might be cooks, laundresses, or servants who tend to the upkeep of the school. Your interactions with them are brief and supervised. A woman who ladles your barley mush into your bowl, a furtive glance, a shared moment of understanding between two people who are both property of the l'honnêteté. Relationships did form in these stolen moments. Some gladiator tombstones were even dedicated by their wives uxores, who were likely fellow slaves within the familiar gladiator. These relationships were a small flicker of humanity in the darkness, but they were entirely at the mercy of the l'honnêteté. He could sell your partner away on a whim. Any children born from such a union would be born into slavery, the property of your owner. And then there was the ultimate and rarest female presence in the arena, the gladiatrix, the female gladiator. Yes, women did fight as gladiators, though it was an exceptionally rare and often scandalous spectacle. They were a novelty act, an exotic diversion from the main event. Sources suggest they often fought in fantasy matchups, perhaps dressed as Amazons. The Emperor Domitian was known to stage nighttime spectacles featuring female gladiators fighting by torchlight. However, this was considered deeply improper by many traditional Romans. A man selling his body for entertainment was shameful enough. A woman doing so was a profound violation of Roman gender roles and a sign of moral decay. Eventually, the Emperor Septimus Severus banned female gladiators altogether in 200 AD. The true extent and nature of the gladiatrix phenomenon is still debated by scholars. The evidence is very thin, a few mentions in texts. A single tombstone found in Halicarnassus, depicting two female fighters named Amazon and Achille. Were they trained in the same nudity as men? Did they follow the same rules, or were they always a sideshow, never taken as seriously as their male counterparts? The fragments of evidence leave more questions than answers. For you, these different female figures are like apparitions from different worlds. The noble woman in the stands is an untouchable symbol of the power that controls your life. The female slave in the barracks is a fellow sufferer, a potential partner in misery. And the rumored gladiatrix is a strange anomaly, a distortion of the brutal world you know. None of them represent a path to freedom or a null life. They are all, in their own way, prisoners of the same system that has enslaved you, a system of rigid social hierarchy, economic exploitation, and violent spectacle. Years are beginning to blur together. You've survived. You've fought in half a dozen different arenas. You've won some, you've lost some. You have a collection of scars that map out your career on your skin. You are a veteran. And with that status comes a quiet, simmering resentment. You see the l'honnêteté growing rich from your sweat and blood. You see the politicians using your fights to win popularity. You are the engine of a massive industry, but you remain a slave. The question begins to bubble up, not just in your mind, but in the whispers between the other veterans in the dead of night. Why don't we fight back? Why don't we just leave? The question inevitably leads to one name, a legend that is both an inspiration and a cautionary tale: Spartacus. Nearly a century before your time, Spartacus, a Thracian gladiator like you, did the unthinkable. He and about 70 other gladiators from Aludus in Capua armed themselves with kitchen knives and training weapons, broke out of their school, and sparked the largest slave rebellion in Roman history. For 2 years, Spartacus and his growing army of escaped slaves and poor freemen rampaged across Italy, defeating multiple Roman legions sent to crush them. It was a terrifying moment for Rome, a fundamental challenge to the very foundation of their slave-based society. The story of Spartacus is a powerful one. It proves that escape and rebellion were possible, but his story also ends in utter failure and horrific retribution. Spartacus was eventually killed in battle, and his army was crushed by the legions of Marcus Licinius Crassus. As a final brutal warning to any other slaves who might get similar ideas, Crassus crucified 6,000 of Sparta of his captured followers along the Appian Way, the main road leading into Rome. The road was lined with crosses, a grotesque and powerful statement of Roman authority. This is the shadow that hangs over any thought of rebellion. The memory of Spartacus is the ultimate deterrent. His rebellion showed that yes, you might be able to break out as the ludus. You might even win a few battles. But you cannot win the war. The full organized might of the Roman state will eventually be brought to bear against you, and the result will be not just death, but an agonizing, exemplary one. This reality explains why large-scale uprisings like the one led by Spartacus were so incredibly rare. But there are other, more subtle reasons why you and your comrades don't just arm yourselves and fight your way out. The ludus itself was a system designed to prevent solidarity. You are deliberate solidarity. You are deliberately between a THRIX and a MU or Milo. It's not just for show, it's ingrained in your training. You are taught to see other gladiators' opponents, not as comrades in a shared struggle. The Loniste fosters jealousy and competition to prize money and privileges. A successful gladiator who is rewarded for his loyalty is less likely to join a rebellion with the struggling novices. Furthermore, you are a collection of men from all over the world. You speak different languages, you worship different gods, you have different cultural backgrounds. That weary man from North Africa, the giant blonde German, the weary Syrian archer, what do you have in common besides your shared misery? Forging a cohesive, organized rebellion from such a disparate group is a monumental challenge. Spartacus managed it, which is a testament to his incredible leadership, but it was a lightning-in-a-bottle event. The question of gladiator resistance is a complex one for historians. While large rebellions were rare, was there smaller, everyday resistance almost certainly. A feigned injury to get out of a fight you knew you would lose. A deliberate work slowed down in the training yard. Sabotaging a rival's equipment. These small acts of defiance were a way to reclaim a tiny bit of agency in a system designed to strip you of it. But these acts were about individual survival, not collective liberation. They didn't challenge the system, they just helped you navigate it. So you remain. You weigh the options in your mind. The near certainty of a horrific death if you rebel, versus the slim but non-zero chance of survival if you continue to fight in the arena. Most men, when faced with that choice, chose to endure. They chose the enemy they knew over the terrifying, absolute power of the Roman state. The dream of freedom is alluring, but the memory of 6,000 crosses on the Appian Way is a powerful anesthetic for revolutionary thoughts. You push the idea of rebellion down, back into the dark corner of your mind where you keep all the other impossible dreams. You pick up your sword. The only way out is through the arena. The ghost of Spartacus has taught you that there is no other path. The years have taken their toll. Your body is a roadmap of scars, each one a memory of a fight, a victory, a loss, a moment of terror. You are no longer the young, terrified man who was first dragged into the ludus. You are a survivor, a veteran, a name that even the newest TIA once whisper with a mixture of fear and respect. But you are also tired. The daily grind, the constant threat of death, the psychological weight of it all, has worn you down to the bone, with a certainty that settles deep in your gut, that your career is coming to an end, one way or another. What is the most likely final chapter for a man like you? The glorious Hollywood ending, where you win your freedom, receive the rudies, and walk off into the sunset, is a statistical fantasy. For every Flamme who survived over 30 fights, for every Rudy Arias who became a trainer, there were countless others who met a grimmer fate. Let's look at the cold, hard numbers. Analysis of gladiator tombstones, which admittedly represent a biased sample of the more successful fighters who could afford a burial, provides some chilling statistics. The average age of death for a gladiator was in the early to mid-20s. While an ordinary Roman citizen who survived childhood could expect to live into their 40s or 50s, your life expectancy was brutally cut short. So what are your most probable endings? The most obvious, and perhaps the most common, is death in the arena. You're a little slower than you used to be. Your reflexes aren't quite as sharp. One day you face a younger, stronger, faster opponent. You make a mistake you wouldn't have made 5 years ago. You find yourself on the sand, the loser's finger raised in supplication. But this time, the crowd is not in a merciful mood. They've seen you fight many times. Maybe they just want to see a dramatic finish. The editor, reading the room, gives the fateful gesture. The sword of your opponent ends your story on the hots and where you lived so much of your life. Your body is dragged unceremoniously through the gate of death, your name forgotten by the next day's games. Another likely end is not in the arena's spotlight, but in the quiet, grim reality of the infirmary. You win a fight, but you take a bad wound, a deep gash that cuts through muscle and sinew. The medicus does his best stitching you up, but the infection sets in. A fever begins to rage. The wound, which looked so glorious and dramatic in the arena, becomes a putrid, stinking mess. There are no antibiotics. There is nothing the doctor can do but offer you puppy juice to dull the pain as your body slowly succumbs to sepsis. You die not with the roar of the crowd in your ears, but with the quiet, indifferent hum of the medical ward. This was an unglamorous but frequent end for many gladiators. Then there is the end that comes from a broken body. You suffer an injury that, while not fatal, is permanently disabling. A shattered knee, a severed tendon in your sore arm. You are no longer a profitable asset to the l'honnêteté. What happens to you? You are useless baggage. He might simply sell you off at a massive loss to work in the mines or on a galley, where you will live out the rest of your short, miserable life performing back-breaking labor. This is a fate worse than a clean death in the arena. It is a slow, living death, stripped of even the faintest glimmer of glory. Which of these fates was the most common, it's impossible to say for sure. And this remains a point of contention and research for historians. The archaeological evidence of skeletons shows healed wounds, but it can't show us deaths from infection. The literary sources focus on the dramatic deaths in the arena. The statistical reality was likely a grim mix of all three, with arena deaths, disease, and being retired to a worse form of slavery all claiming their share. You stand in the training yard, watching the new recruits, the tier ones, go through their clumsy drills. You see the fear and confusion in their eyes, the same fear you had what feels like a lifetime ago. You have survived far longer than most, but you know the odds are catching up to you. Every fight is a roll of the dice, and the dice have no memory. Your story is not an epic poem. It's a grim tale of survival against impossible odds. And all such tales must eventually end. But you know your final chapter is being written, not by you, but by the cold, indifferent calculus of the games. And so your journey comes to a close. The dust of the arena settles, not with a whisper. Feel the story gently fading like the last rays of a Roman sunset bleeding into the cool purple of dusk. The sharp edges of the day begin to soften. The clang of steel, the shouts of the crowd, the frantic pounding of your heart. It all recedes, becoming a distant echo, a memory that is no longer yours to carry. Let the weariness you felt, the deep, bone-sore exhaustion of the survivor become a gentle, heavy blanket. It's a different kind of tired now. Not the fear-driven fatigue of the fighter, but the profound, quiet rest of one whose trials are over. You are no longer in the cell, no longer on the sand. You are drifting in that peaceful space between wakefulness and dream. The world of hard edges and harsh sunlight melts away, replaced by the soft, formless comfort of the approaching night. Each breath you take is slow and deep, pulling you further away from the struggle, further into a place of stillness. The story is over. Your part is played. The end of the article. Good night.